Hey you, and welcome to my channel. My name is Tina and my aim is to improve your drawings just like others have done for me when I just started out. Last week I started this new series where I create a piece just using the three primary colors plus black and white in panpastel for the underlayer. I'm also using the full set from Stabilo Carbothello, but you can just exchange those pencils I use for colors that you have. My goal is to show you that you don't need a massive supply in order to create beautiful drawings. That said, if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, make sure to do so now. That way you won't miss out on any of these videos and you are doing me a great favor by helping my channel grow. By now I added in a lot of the base already, which consists of different blue tones. Light blue for where the lighter parts are going to be, and then a much more gray tone for the darkest areas. My favorite part is still when a drawing comes together, but there is something quite satisfying about getting colors on so fast. On the right side I decided to use warmer tones, hence the red values I used. This was also the case on the reference picture I used, but I decided to amp up the contrast between the two because I thought it would make the drawing more beautiful. I also blocked in the nose and added in the stripes and the other black areas. Don't just use black, I mixed my black panpastel to get a slightly lighter color. Using black will be a bit too strong. Later you still will be able to go over it, and so starting with a slightly lighter color as a base will result in a more depth later on. I chose to add in a little bit of red to end up with a warmer tone as well. Since I'm using panpastels, I'm also using a soft tool to apply it. If you don't have panpastel, you could use soft pastel or pencils for your underlayer, although I strongly believe pencils aren't the best option. I'll give you 3 reasons why I think this is the case. Number 1, since the colors in your underlayer will also be the colors you use for your top layer, the difference will not be as big, and as a result your finished piece will not pop as much. Number 2, this will consume a lot of your pencil, which will end up costing you way more in the long run. And number 3, this also isn't a time-effective way of drawing. Back to the panpastel. I believe the best tools are the tools from the company itself. I find them quite flexible because not only you can choose from different sponges and different sizes of applicators, one thing I really like about them is the following. When I want to block in a lot of color, I just use the bottom of the tool. For this particular piece, I used a rectangular shape, which gave me a quite large surface to work with. And now for the convenient part, wherever I needed a smaller line or stripe, I can just tilt the tool in such a way that I'm adding the pastel with a thin side. Because I used a soft tool to put the pastel on my paper and I already mixed most of the color on a separate sheet of paper, I also don't need to do any blending on my pastel matte paper. So when I decided I'm done with my underlayer, I can just move on to my pencils. I always say it's easier to work from the top left to the bottom right, but for pieces that are smaller I just like to start with the eyes. So I first used the darker green, and on top of that I used ivory and a yellow. To blend this out I used a small blending stump. Make sure your tip is clean, otherwise you might contaminate some of the colors you've got going on already. I will continue to layer some color on there and blend it out. In one of the later layers I like to add stripes to replicate the lines you can see in the eyes. I'm also going to darken it up around the eye, and this time I'm just using black to do that. I find that it helps to darken up areas to help you judge your values better. Moving over to some of the fur. On the left side I started out with a very light blue. If you haven't got a lot of experience, this might seem a little bit scary at first since it is so bright, but the blue is actually present in your subject. We might not be able to see it with our own eyes, but if you were to use a color picker, you would see what I mean. When I blend this out a little bit with my finger, you can already see that some of the sharpness is disappearing, and later on this bright blue is going to be muted down by the following layers. I'm also using 2 different shades of blue, where one is even lighter than the other one. The lightest one is the one I will be using most. Now, some of the things you need to pay attention to is the curve of the fur. This one is really important if you want to achieve a realistic look. For example, the fur on the left side is almost going horizontal, whereas the fur near the nose is almost going vertical. These are the 2 opposites, of course, and you'll find a lot of variation in there. A beautiful thing about drawing tigers is that you get a little bit of help. Their black markings can help guide you where the fur should be curved. I'm going to fill up the black markings on the left side of the tiger, and for this I'm just using a mix of black and brown. I want the black in there to make sure that it hits a certain level of darkness, but to soften everything a little bit, I'll also use the brown. It's all about finding the right balance between the two. Again, just make sure you keep paying attention to the curve and the length of your strokes. Another important thing that you need to pay attention to is the length of your fur. Fur isn't the exact same size everywhere. Again, the fur on the side is much larger and longer, and when you look at the nose, there I'm using very short strokes. If you don't do this, you will end up with a drawing that looks a little bit off. If you happen to have a dog or a cat at home, all you need to do is take a close look at their face to see what I mean. On a side note, for this piece in particular, I'm only working with the pencils from Stabilo Carbothello. But if I feel the need for a very dark black, I'm almost always going to use the black chalk pencil from Cretacolor. By now you might be thinking I'm doing a blue tiger, but the end result of course is a white tiger. So after I build the fur with the layers of blue, I'm going to start going lighter. You should definitely not start with white, instead use a grey color. In combination with the blues, this will already give the illusion of white. As you can see, I will go over this pretty much everywhere that I can see blue. After I added some of that grey, I'm going to move over to the nose. Nothing too fancy here, I'll just darken up some areas, and for other areas I will add more pinkish tones. Then I can blend this out with the blending stump, which gives me a lot of accuracy. The nose of this tiger has some spots on it, so I want to achieve the same look by adding a couple of blotches of the lighter tone on there. And if I then blend this out, I can achieve a similar look. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I wanted to push the contrast more between the cold and the warm values. So to achieve this, I'm actually going to add some more blue to the fur on the left. Most of this is going to be on the far left of the tiger. This is where the coolest areas are going to be, and I'll just add some as I'm moving more to the center, but not as much. For the bridge of the nose, I'm going to use that blue again. This is on the left side of the face and as such is still in the more shaded area. Here I'll start by using that color as my base instead of the fur. Again, I blend this out with my finger and this takes away quite a lot of the sharpness of the color. I then first switch to my black pencil to add some fur on top of my white. It might be surprising, but a white tiger actually has loads of darker fur in there. I'm then going to start building the left side of the nose bridge. Now that I look back onto it, I did this in a rather funny pattern, but this was for no particular reason. For the color, I'm using a grey that isn't too dark. Especially for the fur surrounding the nose, you need to use really short strokes. As you move up, you can make them a bit longer, but in general, the fur is short here. And as you reach the center of the nose, make sure you change the angles of the strokes. This way you can give the illusion that this is where the bridge of the nose bends. As I move more to the right side of the nose, I need to think if I should adjust the colors I'm using, but for the area that is still part of the muzzle, I can still keep using the same grey. After I put on the layer with the grey, I can start adding some black fur in. Again, just like I did before, you don't need to cover every inch, you just need to get enough in to darken it up a little bit. For the bridge, I'm actually putting strokes opposite of each other, which kind of looks like triangles. This emphasizes the curves of the bridge even more. I'm also going to go back to the lower eyelid and adjust this a little bit to add some more depth. Don't be afraid to go back to some areas of your drawing if you feel like it still needs some more refinement. Now that I have the darkest layers in there, I'm going to lighten everything up a little bit. Again, I won't be using a white, instead I opt to use a very light grey. By adding this light layer as the last layer, the finished look is immediately a lot lighter. I'm also going in for a second round on the nose. I'm using the same colors, but I want to amp up the depth here. So I'm adding some smaller lines, but most importantly, I'm amping up the highlights on the nostrils. After I finished the nose, I started adding in the black on the black areas I see on the right side. I make sure that I follow the curve along and then I just blend it out a little bit with my blending stump. Using my finger here wouldn't be such a great idea since the two stripes of black are way too close together. Then it's back again to that grey to fill up the areas in between. The right side is for the biggest part a repetition of the left side. The biggest difference here is that I wanted that side to be much warmer. I laid my base for this by adjusting the colors in my underlayer. On the left side I used the blue in the underlayer to achieve that cooler tone, and on the right side I used that pinkish white to establish a warmer tone. So even as I'm going over this with the same colors, the end result is already quite different because of this. To make it even warmer, I'm going to add in some yellow. On the left side I did the same thing with the blue, but on this side I want to achieve the opposite effect. Adding yellow will give it a much warmer feel. I will mute this down a little bit by pushing it into the paper with my finger and by going over it with some ivory. The right side is the only area where I actually use a lot of white. After this I'll just use it to tidy up some areas of the drawing, but with this my drawing has almost come to an end. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and that it has been helpful for you. If you haven't by now, make sure you hit that subscribe button to help support this channel. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. I really appreciate your support, as this helps to grow my channel and reach other people just like yourself. Hope to see you again next Friday, and in the meantime, have a great week.